My teleprompter's ready. All right, we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to CSM Mastermind. My name is Andrew Marks from Success Coaching, and we're back with our monthly live event for CSMs. Wherever you are around the world listening to this live or the recording, we've got another great conversation with a great group of customer success practitioners. For those of you who haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live call, and we're going to dig into a single topic that we think is very relevant, very pertinent to customer success managers. Whatever company you work for, whatever size customer you deal with, we try and pick topics that are going to be practical and useful for you. There's a lot of thought leadership out there. There's a lot of theory about how to do customer success. This series allows us to focus on the practical and give you real-world advice, tips, techniques, tricks, and experience from those out in the wild that are practicing customer success on a daily basis. To do that, we invite 3 participants in the customer success community from our extensive network. These are people, for the most part, that have been recommended to us as being great at their craft and ask them to share their own experiences. I'm very excited to welcome our expert panel for today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves and give me 2 truths and a lie about yourself, and I'll try and guess which are the lies. And then I'll introduce the topic that we're going to be talking about. So let's get started with Lisa. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa Mercer, and I am a Senior Customer Success Manager at ServiceMax. And my truths and my lie. I've seen Madonna in concert 17 times, and I'm planning to see her 6 more times in October. I met Steve Jobs and told him I loved him. And I met Eric Clapton and told him he was my 2nd favorite guitar player ever.
I'm going to say the lie is Steve Jobs.
You are correct.
All right. Although, I got to say, it takes a lot of chutzpah to call Eric Clapton the second best guitar player ever.
Ever. Ever.
I mean, that's because he's up there. But, yeah. Okay, yeah. Great. Thanks, Lisa. Christy, you're up next.
All right, Andrew. Thank you for having me today. My name is Christy Falteruso. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success at BetterCloud. We are a SaaS operations management platform, so we enable IT and security professionals to manage their IT infrastructure through their SaaS applications. My 2 truths and a lie. I was on the cover of the New York Magazine. I grew up next door to Billy Joel. I was an adjunct professor for 4 years.
I'm going to say cover in New York Magazine.
Nope. I was a baby model for the first 5 years of my life, and in '83, I was on the cover of New York Magazine, and I will send you the picture after this.
You have to. so which is the lie?
So I did not grow up next door to Billy Joel, but he lived a couple blocks from me. So I grew up in Glen Cove on Long Island in Nassau County, and so he was just a few blocks away from where I was. Sweet.
Did you ever see him, meet him, talk to him?
Yep.
Stalk him?
Would often, nope. I am a huge fan. We didn't get to stalker level, but definitely would run into him in like neighborhood pizzerias and cafes and things like that. So it was always very cool when you did spot him.
Nice. Cool. Thank you. And last but not least, Cole.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So my name is Cole Sanders. I'm a Senior Customer Success Manager here at Client Success, which is actually a customer success platform. 2 truths and a lie. I lived in Spain and went to Spanish school. I made $1.2 million off of Bitcoin, and I lived in Guatemala and taught English.
I'm going to say Bitcoin.
Nailed it.
Nice.
Nailed it. I knew that was too big of a lie.
Well, the only people that I know that made anything, lost, anybody that I know that was in Bitcoin lost a ton. So. Great. Thanks, everyone. So let's get to the topic for today. With how quickly companies are scaling both their staff and customer acquisition, at some point in your career as a CSM, you may experience some type of progress or positive change that will cause you to leave your current role and move to a different one. It may mean you're transitioning from one type of account to another, such as a mid-market to enterprise, or your team may be expanded and you're no longer the sole account manager. You've been pushed into another group. your focus during this transition process should be to help the new CSM fully understand the new accounts they're taking on and make the transition as seamless as possible for your customers. We'd love to hear from the panelists how you've successfully transferred accounts within your organization and gather some practical suggestions on how others can do the same. Make sense?
It does.
Who wants to start? Who wants to kick it off?
I can kick it off. So as far as transitions go, in my opinion, I think that that's just as fragile as the onboarding in several ways. And I think when you are transitioning an account, it's kind of a weird situation for the customer where, you know, not only are they getting a new point of contact, but they don't know how the relationship's going to go with this new point of contact. And so I think it's important for, you know, the CSM that is transferring the account to be as delicate as possible, which means, you know, sending an email with ample time of a heads up of when and how this transition is going to work. Having a call where, you know, the introduction to the new CSM has been made and everything that you've been working on with that customer has been brought up so that that customer is feeling comfortable and confident that they're being transitioned into, you know, a different area where they're still going to be taken care of and they're not going to have that call where somebody gets on and says, hey, I'm your new CSM, so I know you're working with Cole. Can you give me an idea where you're at? That's like the worst thing a customer could ever hear.
Makes sense. Christy, Lisa, any?
Yep, I'll jump in here. Oh, sorry, Lisa, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Great. So in my experience, you know, obviously this is a very delicate situation, but it does come up at different points in the customer journey, right? It could be through you've got employee growth and someone's moving into a new role. It could be an employee exiting the organization. It could also be things like you're resegmenting your organization, or a customer has outgrown a segment that you've had them in previously, right? Maybe they've grown as an organization, their revenue has grown, and so you want to treat them differently. As a result, you might want to transition them. So I think how you manage that also depends on what the situation is. For example, if you've got an employee who's maybe exiting the organization, you might need to accelerate what that process looks like. So we have created at BetterCloud a process that manages this in full detail dependent on the cause and need for transition. For example, if we've got a customer who's moving up a segment, so maybe it's someone who's in our enterprise segment today, moving to strategic accounts, which is our top tier, this is a very positive experience because basically what we're telling our customer is we're making a heightened level investment in them and we want to grow the partnership. And so as a result, we're giving them somebody who's got more expertise, maybe an SME. We are now formulating an account team behind them. That entire model looks very different and should be a very positive experience for our customer. Now, there is disruption in the changing of hands, right? So the same way you would think of moving an account from that sales process and that sales handover to your customer success manager, we treat it the same way. So internally, we require the following things. We do use Gainsight to manage our customer journey internally. So that is housing all of the data around customers. So we require that every CSM before an account is transitioned has all of their information documented and current. This is including their relationship map, so we understand who the players are, right? We say like the who's who in the zoo. We make sure that we've got a completed timeline of all of our engagement activity. We've got tracking of all of the email, and we've got all of their use cases and their programs documented as well. So we understand why they purchased, when they purchased, what their use cases are, what are their business goals and objectives, who are the core players in the relationship that we need to navigate, when their renewal is up, any nuances about how they're using it, right? So everything we need to know about that account, the current CSM is responsible for keeping that current and updating it. And then the receiving CSM is responsible for getting fully up to speed. We also do require accounts to have a formal internal handoff if the account is of a certain size or segment. So dependent on that, right, there's different things that we will invest to make it a more seamless process. And then from a communication standpoint, we actually have our management team manage the communication to the customer because we want to also use it as an opportunity to re-engage them because it is a delicate process. So if it's, you know, someone, more of our top tier customers and a more strategic partner, that message might come from me directly as our vice president. In other cases, we might have our directors or some managers be communicating that. And we do this to make sure that our customers know that we are invested in creating a very seamless process for them. And we're here to help them navigate this should it be a bit more disruptive than we hope. But we feel like if we've got all of the information, we're doing our due diligence to do that proper knowledge share, it should be as seamless as a proper sales handoff.
Lisa, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of things that we focus on. We do very similar to Christy, but in our organization, CSMs are assigned based on a level of engagement or support that's purchased. So, from a segmentation perspective, customers come in knowing what their support level and their engagement with the CSM will be. So our changes tend to be maybe we're realigning industry, or we have new team members coming in and we're doing account balancing. On our side, the process is driven by the CSMs. If it is still, every CSM is within the organization. So we try not to escalate that up to a VP level unless, of course, it requires that. We want to make sure that we have the ownership and the transfer of the relationship. I think one of the things that we make sure that we do that we've learned over time is to make sure that we do proper back-end prepping and internal communication. So we want to make sure that our marketing team knows who the new point of contact is. We want to make sure that any previous people engaged from a professional services perspective have been properly transitioned. Because what we don't want to happen is the customer then get confused down the road when we have a PS person reach out and include a former CSM. So we want to look very coordinated internally. We then go through and make sure that we've scrubbed an updated Salesforce in every component in our CRM with new contact information, reporting, all of those internal components. So we maintain a checklist that has responsibility and accountability for all of the teams that we have engaged with the account to ensure that not just the systematic pieces are transferred, but that it's a new relationship seeds are planted and developed in a very organic way.
Got it. So what do you do if the customer responds unfavorably to or there's a situation where there is some sort of issue between the customer success manager and that customer? How do you address that?
Yeah, so to your first point, that's why we keep the escalation point of a VP or somebody higher aware. So if we're doing a relationship transfer CSM to CSM and an issue does arrive, we have an escalation point that's not at our C-suite. So, we would then at that point engage a VP to come in. And then from regular account reviews, at the same thing, we would escalate to our directors, VPs, if a customer is not responding kindly to a CSM engagement. We also break out our NPS where customers are asked to rate not just overall NPS, but it's an NPS on CSM. It's an NPS on professional services, on support, on all the people that they engage with. So annually, we're getting feedback from an NPS perspective of where their assigned resources fall.
Got it. Christy, have you ever had a customer push back on a transfer?
Yes, many times across all of the organizations where I've managed this always comes up. And, sometimes it's for good reason, right? Sometimes, and I'll use one particular instance. This is me running this at another organization, but where I was also our vice president. I had been managing one of our largest customers for this organization. And, at that level, I shouldn't have been managing accounts, but there was this one customer in particular who would not let me transition off the account, given how strategically I was involved for the years that I'd been there, and I had been working with them for 5+ years. So in that case, we made a business decision to say, I would stay on that account because of the strategic nature of the engagement and the impact that I was driving for this customer, and obviously how it drove outcomes for them. And so obviously the impact of the business and them, we made a business call there. In other cases, it depends, right? So we've had CSMs obviously build and foster strong relationships with customers. And it's hard when you're taking away somebody who has built that trusted advisor status. So in some cases, what we might do is a slower transition, right? We do want to explain to the customer, like, they shouldn't have a different or less than experience with this new individual, but we want to earn that trust and credibility. So we might say, okay, we're going to run this in parallel for a little while. And we've run plays like that to make it easier for the customer to adjust to this new individual while we're putting them into this position of power in this partnership. And then other times we've had customers who are thrilled, right? So it really depends on like what's going on in the account. We manage it accordingly. At the end of the day, we want to do what's best for the customer. I always feel like if we do what's right for them, everything else will work itself out internally. There are instances where you just have to cut the cord, but we want to manage it very delicately. So I think it really just depends.
That makes sense. What about you, Cole? Have you had an experience where like a customer just didn't want to let go of you?
I have, yeah, and I think that's pretty typical in a CSM's world. To piggyback a little bit off of what Christy was talking about, I think it's important, instead of having a one-size-fits-all process where, hey, when we have a transition, this is how we do it, and this is how we do it every time. One thing I think you guys do really good over there at Success Hacker is, really push the concept of, all right, take yourself out of the situation and think, what would the customer think about this? And that's a concept that I've really taken to heart from you. And the reason for that is because, to Christy's point, there are times where account needs to be transitioned, and it doesn't make sense to transition that account for the health and the sake of the customer overall. So sometimes you do have to sacrifice and just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to continue on working with you. It's going to be better in the long run than us trying to transition, even though that may be a better fit for our internal status. So I think at the end of the day, the most important thing with, transitioning customers, and when you have a customer that's pushing back, is to, take the situation and like you guys talked about there at Success Hacker, what would the customer think? How will this affect the customer? Because at the end of the day, it's more important that our customers are happy and that we're doing what's best for them than we're doing what's best for us internally. And, we end up losing customers that we could have kept had we just been a little bit more strategic about it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thanks for the plug, by the way. So have you ever had a situation though where you've used, Christy, in your example, you say you've had to move a customer in a new CSM because they've moved into a different segment, right? They've grown. But could you use that as a opportunity to maybe groom that customer success manager to move into that segment and take on more larger, more complex customers?
I think where it makes sense, we've definitely advanced customer success managers based on their performance with their customers. And if it is timely, if there is a role open, right? We also just don't move folks for the sake of moving it. It really does have to align with like our growth plan and strategy, and does it make sense for the business, and do they really have the skills and capabilities to do that job, right? We're not just going to move somebody for the sake of moving them. So I think it depends. I have not had to move customers and as a result promoted somebody so that they can maintain that partnership. In cases where we had a customer that was moving up a tier in terms of like the engagement model that we were providing, what we have done there, if there was a need to kind of keep the relationship with the previous CSM, but we wanted to change the model, we would give this CSM an opportunity to use this as a way to prove their growth rather than to just put them into that new role.
Got it. Lisa, have you ever had a situation where somebody it's great when you're able to properly manage expectations and give the customer, a runway to be able to accept the change, but inevitably people are going to leave companies, and some may leave with very little notice, either because they're going, they're moving on themselves on their own accord, or you've had to cut ties with them for some reason or another. How do you deal with that? That's like, dumping cold water over the customer. So how do you handle those types of situations?
And those are the situations where we engage from a VP or an executive level to start that transfer. So within our organization, we do keep very tight engagement with our leadership team and our customers who are engaged with CSMs. So fortunately, there's typically a base of a relationship already established. So in that case, we have a plan in place of who we're putting in and why. Our leadership team would go in and have a candid discussion about, hey, we have to make a change, and unfortunately we're making it very quickly, but these are the things that we're doing behind the scenes to ensure that you have no disruption in service, knowledge level, action plans, and that no balls are dropped. So we're pretty transparent, and like I said, that's where we use that layers of escalation to bring in the right person at the right level to deal with those more immediate situations or needs to transfer.
The dramatic ones, right?
Yes.
And so you've all talked about managing expectations with with the customers. How do you do that during the transition? Do you have a cadence that's especially for those types of transitions? Are there, is it a combination of calls and emails, or even a site visit, depending on the size of the organization? Cole, you want to jump into that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think that's exactly what it is. Taking a step back and understanding who the customer is and what the customer means to the organization. If it is a big organization that has been very loyal to us, I think an on-site makes sense. You want to make this, because again, like I said at the beginning, I feel like this is a very fragile and delicate situation for the customer because they don't know what they're getting. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is that the customer understands that they're going to be understood, they're going to be taken care of, and they're not just going to be thrown on the back burner because either the CSM they had that was good and phenomenal at what they did, or pretty crappy and the customer is really excited for this transition. However that was, the customer needs to understand that they're going to be placed in good hands and that they're still, top of mind. And so whatever that may be, whether it's, going over special sauce notes, going over, important information with the new CSM over call, or just, getting on a flight and heading out and showing up in person and spending some time. I think overall, the customer just needs to know that they're important above and all anything else. And I think at that point, the transition is going to go fairly smoothly. But if they feel like they're just kind of being thrown off into a new CSM, hey, sorry, I have to go, or, hey, we just had this guy or this girl quit on us and out of the blue. And, that's going to really ruffle the feathers of the customer and make them feel uncomfortable. So I think just, putting on your strategic hat and thinking, again, how is the customer gonna feel about this and how will this affect? I think if you keep that in mind, you can't go wrong with making the right decision on how this transition should go.
And Christy, you mentioned, it's just like the transition from sales to post-sales. You have a really effective transition. You don't have people going in and say, okay, tell me what's going on. So this new CSM is showing up, I would assume, with your process. And are you going in and just, instead of saying, yeah, we know what's going on, are you going through that validation step that you typically go through in that sales to post-sales transition process?
Yeah, that's actually exactly what it is. We almost treat it the same way, right? The handoff is the handoff. Now, listen, when you have an employee who's leaving and you don't have the same timeline and you've got to move quickly, this is where documentation of all that is so critical. And you need to make sure that you've got everything in place so that someone can seamlessly jump in with or without somebody doing that formal handoff. But yeah, we do make sure that it is a seamless process. We go in with an understanding of the customer, really, I think, as in-depth as we can, with an understanding of, again, why they purchased, what their needs are, what their business objectives were, how they're measuring success with us, understanding how they're using the product today, who their core power users are, where we are in their program management. And then from there, the new CSM is there to say, here's my understanding of where we are in this partnership and in this journey. And here's my understanding of what you need from me to continue to advance you through this change management. And because that's what it is, right? Like, people buy software to use it to change something that they were doing before. So for us, it's a lot of just reconfirming what we know about the account, getting them to validate that with us. And I think just having that conversation and validation starts to establish that trust, right? That we've done our due diligence, we know about the account, we know what's going on, and we're here to pick up exactly where you left off. Now, also, if you're doing a great job onboarding your CSMs and training your employees and enabling them, the experience should be consistent, right? You shouldn't have one CSM who's going above and beyond and doing cartwheels and somebody else who's just kind of like floundering around and providing like C-level service. So there should be some continuity from what their expectations are as a customer in terms of what they're getting, and again, our knowledge of their account moving forward.
Makes sense. Lisa, anything else to chime in on that?
No, I think just, echoing what Cole and Christy said, I think that's kind of the industry standard.
Good. Now we've talked about all this, documentation and this process. Let's take a little divergence here into the systems and how do you ensure the processes and the workflows and the playbooks, are being used, are centrally located, people have access to them. What type of tools and systems do you all use to kind of maintain that, maintain all that information? Lisa, why don't you start?
We use Salesforce as our CRM, complemented with Box for our document management. So have a process in place for contact ownership, account ownership, notification of meetings, and then supplement all of the non-Salesforce stored information in structured Box folders, and then email Outlook client for internal team meetings and those types of items.
So I as a new CSM can log on and look at an account and see pretty much everything that I need to see right on Salesforce.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What we want, and then like I said, we do link back to Box for our large document repository, but the goal is to make sure that nothing is stored just within somebody's individual email or a paper notepad. So yeah, or up here, but yeah, right, exactly. Box, Salesforce is our entry point into all things customers based.
Now in that customer record, I mean, it's one thing to store the basics about the customer, all the details about the customer, but do you look at also, do you capture information about the personalities that you're dealing with, things like that? This customer could be touchy. This customer is very distant, that sort of thing. So a new CSM coming in understands the type of personalities you're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. We do everything from individual to individual health of a relationship to overall account health. Mm-hmm. The tricky part of all of this is a lot of what we do is based on our relationship and our interpretation of that relationship. So you and I may meet and instantly hit it off. Mm-hmm. And so my take of you as a customer, or you as an engagement, might be very different than somebody who comes in and for whatever reason you don't click with, or they just don't rub you the right way. So we try to make sure that we capture what our existing relationship is, and then hurdles that you may have to overcome. So, hey, I get along really well with this person, but it's because I understand that they like this communication style, or before every meeting, they'll love you forever if you send them your PowerPoint deck and your agenda so they can process their questions in advance. We don't necessarily have a field in Salesforce that says, happy, shiny person, a little bit prickly. Although that might be a great field to build in. I do think that's, one of the things that's hard to gather about relationship management is you're giving your take of a relationship, but then also providing the keys to how you built that relationship.
Wouldn't it be great if we could have like Myers-Briggs on every one of our customers?
All of them. Yeah.
What about you?
I love it.
What about you, Christy? You guys you mentioned you're using GainSight.
Yeah. So we actually, Lisa, I know that level of detail that you're not capturing, we actually are capturing it. So we created a couple different fields at the contact.
Well, and just to clarify, we're capturing it, but not as a Salesforce drop, not like a pick list in Salesforce.
Yeah, so that's the difference. So I'm explaining is we do have it on the Salesforce contact record type. So because we do port it into GainSight, we manage all of our contacts through that. So for each individual contact, we have a kind of user status type. So are they our executive buyer? Are they the day-to-day contact? Are they our main point of contact? Are they the influencer, whatever? So did they sign the contract, right? So we know we've categorized and have about 15 different categorizations for each individual contact on every account. We also have shared sentiment. So we know do we feel like this person is a supporter? Are they detractor? Are they passive? Are they not really engaged? We also have a field that does allow you to add notes. And so about that person, could be anything you know about them, right? Like recently got married, has 3 kids, like this communication style, right? So like things that are going to allow us to build a personal relationship without too much background context, right? Like we have some things that we can dive right in. And then we also pull in each person's individual CSAT scores and in the timeline in which they submitted. So we're also getting the sentiment that they've shared at a contact level, so we can see all of that and house it in one place. So when we go to engage with somebody, we already know what their role is in the partnership, how they're feeling. So what is their general sentiment based on what we feel as a CSM. And then also what their CSAT score is, sort of allows us to understand, okay, for this individual person, here's how they've rated us and their feedback. And then the notes, right? Like, which I think give it that personal touch, which is really, I think, important. How you build relationships is through that humanization of each of those individuals, right? They're not a contact and a customer, right? They're a person, and here's how they like to be communicated with, as Lisa described, and here's some fun facts about them so that we can start to anchor on that to build your own relationship. So that's how we've been doing it at a contact level. And then all that gets housed into Gainsight for us to manage very holistically.
I love that. And Cole, I know you're not using Gainsight, but
I know it pains me to have Cole on this call as I'm talking through all this.
And I'm sure it's not the first time he's heard other companies, but that just validates the space. So do you capture that in client success?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, before I jump into that, I just wanted to hit on a really good point that Lisa brought up, which is, you know, there's so many ways of capturing that information out there, but one thing you cannot do is let your CSM keep that information in their head or in their email, because you have so many scenarios where then that data is just lost and it's gone. So great point on that. But yeah, client success, we've got a ton. I could literally walk out of this room right now if a CSM left and pick up any account that wasn't mine and know exactly where they're at in their journey. And the reason for that is because we've got things like scorecard. That's where we're able to track what features, modules the customer's using of client success. We've got what's called Pulse, where we can track their sentiment and go back and see the historical data on why I set that Pulse the way I did, what the ROI the customer is getting is, how many days it's been since that customer has been touched or engaged with. But then we've got success cycles that's also, you know, a playbook of where the customer is at in their customer journey, how far through that playbook they're at, what they've accomplished, what they still need to accomplish. And then our summary notes, like Christy was talking about, that are really reserved for us to be able to go in and say, oh, okay, you know, they love the Philadelphia Eagles. Flag goes fly, by the way.
Sorry about that.
but you know, this customer loves, you know, the Eagles, or they love to trail run, or they just had a baby, or it was their son's birthday, stuff like that, so that you can build those relationships. Because I think it's so important when renewal time comes around for the customer to understand, okay, you know, I'm getting an ROI out of this platform and this is great, but the relationship that I have with my CSM, they know everything about me. They know what I love, what I don't like, how to take care of me. I think that goes a long way in securing a renewal. And so, yeah, we've got all of that type of stuff in client success. And so literally, you know, anything I'm doing with my customer, it's documented right there. Any email that I send them, that they send me, is captured in our engagements module. Anytime we do a phone call, we're leaving the notes on who we spoke to, what the call was about. So, you know, if the customer even sneezes, it's documented in client success. And that's how we go through really and are able to make these transitions so smooth at the end of the day, because it doesn't matter how, you know, much the CSM that's giving the account over is involved or not involved, because we've got everything from day one until today on what's been going on with this customer.
Do any of you, I know all of you, I believe all of you have been through our course. Do any of you use success plans?
Yes.
We do.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So that success plan is something that you can hand to a new CSM. Here's where the customer's at on their success journey.
Right. Yeah, you can do that. And I think the success plan is huge. And that goes along with a lot of the things that I add while working with client success. But to Christy's point, I think, you know, even more so of having a success plan is having a team that has been well trained and you know, well taught, with having, you know, being on the same page with their personalities and being on the same page with delivering a customer experience. Because if I have this success plan like you teach there at Success Hacker, and I hand it to a CSM, as long as they've been developed, like it sounds like Christy's team has been developed, then that CSM is easy to just run with it. They know what to do. They know how to interact with the customer. They know what, you know, next steps are and marching orders are, rather than somebody having to hold their hand through the entire thing and, you know, make sure that it's a good experience for everybody. So the success plan, like you said, Andrew, is, you know, something that everybody should be doing. And if they don't, I give you another plug here, I guess, but how could they, so this isn't on purpose, but how,
I swear to God, we didn't plan this.
He didn't, I swear. But I mean, if they don't know what it is, you know, where could they find that, or how could, you know, somebody find more information on? Because I think that that's something that is a necessity when it comes to keeping track of accounts.
And Cole, to build on that, our success plans are developed collaboratively with our sales teams and any other internal teams that are engaged. So they're the core of our monthly internal meetings. So it's not just something that we're relying on a CSM to know and transfer. So if anybody new internally comes onto that account team, everybody's working from the same plan and the same understanding of both business and solution goals.
That's
I'm going
correct.
to add on that one more.
Yes.
For certain segments that we also have the customers collaborate with us on those the success plans, right? Like they're keeping them current with us. They're not ours, right? Mm-hmm. Success plans are our customers' plans, right? It's how they're going to be successful.
Like that.
So we really encourage the collaboration there. So while they're really useful during this process and they're really helpful for us to enable their CSMs, at the end of the day, having the transparency with our customers on what we're working on, that's also really transformed that engagement, right? So the customer's not surprised when a new CSM walks in and says, okay, we're working on these 5 things, because it's all up to date, and the customer as well as the CSM, they're all on the same page working on it together.
Right. Yeah, good point, Christy.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, we use success plans we don't base it on segmentation. We base it on if you're a member of our success program or not. Anybody participating in our success plan has a collaborative success plan that's used developed as part of their strategy day, and then reviewed and built on collaboratively with their internal team and the success team at the customer site during their QBRs. That's
great. Just yet another tool that you can use when you do end up having to transfer. Just another tool that will give that new person that much more exposure to what's going on in the customer, because it is even in the sales to post sales process, and one of the things we talk about is the worst thing that you can do is walk in the room once the customer signed and say, okay, well, why are you here and what are you doing, right? So that being able to have a new CSM, to your point, Christy, it's the same thing. Having a new CSM walk in and validate, right? It demonstrates to that customer that this new CSM that's walking in still, really does understand where they're at, and it's going to allay any concerns or not any, but will allay a lot of concerns that the customer has, that they've got now somebody new to deal with. And it's that same feeling that a customer gets when they first get introduced to customer success after they've signed the contract, which is a huge risk point, right? Because it's a whole new team where you walk in and you're validating what they had already told the sales team.
Hey, Andrew.
Just one thing to add on to that.
Yeah, hold on, Cole. Lisa, go ahead.
I think the thing that what you've just said that really resonates, our approach is we should start planning for transition the minute we start that engagement. So everything we do should be geared towards the point that we have to transition, in terms of, are we continually capturing what's needed to have continuity within our organization? It's no different than any other business continuity plan. It's just that this is a relationship continuity plan.
Yeah, makes sense. Cole?
Yeah, I was going to say, for anybody that's listening that may be, asking, all right, how do we gain this information, or what are best practices around this? One thing that we do here at Client Success is anytime a new customer, signs, before they even have the kickoff call, we'll send out, a survey or something like that to them, where, it's basically asking, hey, why did you buy Client Success? What do you want to accomplish? What are, all of that success criteria that Christy mentioned, so that as the CSM, I'm seeing that before I even have the kickoff call with them. So I know why they bought us, what their pains are, what they want to accomplish, but then I'll throw that into a playbook in our success cycles, where I can go through and check things off as we complete them. And I think that that's really nice for the customer, because I'm validating what they said, instead of them buying us because they want to reduce churn by 8%. Well, what does that mean? Everybody wants to reduce churn by 8%, but then when we get into the nitty gritty of it, and okay, well, how should we do this? Why are you experiencing churn? What is this? And you really get into the deeper levels of why they're experiencing this pain point. Then we can set our goals and our milestones on the call each time for me to go through the success cycle internally, or my playbook, and say, hey, you know what? It looks like we've reduced churn by this. It looks like we've accomplished this. I know you bought us for this. We're doing. So I'm always validating what they're getting out of client success. I'm always validating the ROI, so there's never that question of, you know, is this tool working for us? Are we getting what we need out of this? Is my CSM actually doing a good job for me? It's just a really easy way to get some wins so that the customer stops looking at you as just a point of contact there at the organization and starts looking at you as more of a consultant or a trusted advisor, where instead of them saying, hey, this is broke, or hey, we need this feature request, it's more of, hey, Cole, how do I do this? How do I accomplish that? Because I've built that rapport with them, and it all started with me tracking their success criteria from the beginning and then pointing out as we've created successes during the journey.
Well, and that's a good, I mean, and actually that brings up a good point. You know, there's when you transition, because we're talking about transitions, right? When you transition to a new person, your trusted advisor leaves. So it's not like, hey, here's a new CSM, he's your trusted advisor, right? You've got to rebuild that relationship. Right. So are there things that are there approaches that you use, for example, Christy, to accelerate that, or is it really just, hey, we need, you know, this new CSM it's just going to take time, right?
Going to take time.
Yeah.
Relationships, like any relationship, whether it's with a spouse, a partner, a customer, it takes time to develop, and you earn that trusted status over time. When you deliver on, when you are reliable, when you are authoritative, right? If you think about the trust equation, and we talk about that a lot internally, like how do you earn trust? It's demonstrated day in and day out, right? Like, can your customer count on you when you say you're going to do something? Do you do it? Do you meet the deadlines that you're setting and that they're setting with you? Can they trust that you're authoritative and you know what you're talking about? These are the ways that you're going to earn trust, right? And then if you think of the trust equation, right, it's all over self-orientation. Are your objectives and your goals aligned with your customers' objectives and goals? Or is there an ulterior motive driving that behavior? And so for us internally, I believe that, listen, there's no way to accelerate that. It's going to happen. For some customers and some relationships, we can do it faster than others. Some people are less cynical about the relationship and the transition, and they maybe have a positive outlook, like this is going to be a great relationship and we're going to move forward, and they steer their ship with positivity. And then I've got other customers who are pissed off and mad, and like, you know, it's going to take us a little bit longer. But I think if we always do what our customers need us to do, when we need to do it, we build that trust, we are authoritative, they have continuity in their experience, we can collectively earn that over time.
Great. And Lisa, before you weigh in on this, we do have we actually have some attendees. That's great. And if they have any questions, you can ask questions. So we'd love to hear from you if you have any questions for the panelists. Lisa, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I said earlier, you know, sometimes, you know, these relationships have to build organically. But I think the one thing that can make that relationship develop is how we handle the relationship with the exiting CSM when the exiting CSM is still in the organization and still has access to the customer. So, you know, it's managing that expectation of, we're telling you your new contact point is X. What is our internal plan when this customer keeps going back to their original CSM? How are we redirecting? How are we ensuring that the customer is accepting the transition? It's something that we've struggled with, not to manage, but to struggle with customer perception. So let's say I move on to a new account and somebody else is managing my old account. I'm still there. I'm still at events. I'm still on their cell phone. I'm still, you know, for 4 years, they've called me. That's their instinct. So it's also helping to make sure we're consistent with our messaging of who's owning that new relationship. And I think that's the struggle for all of us as CSMs. Internally, we're here to make the customers successful and do what we feel is right by them, and telling them no is counterintuitive. So it's how do we help them yet reinforce the new direction? And I think that becomes a challenge in a relationship-based world that we all have to be very cognizant of during transitions where both CSMs are still in the same segment, the same customer base, kind of the same circles.
Lisa, I have a question on that. Sorry, Andrew.
No, go ahead.
I do agree, right? There's an interesting dynamic that happens there. But if the previous CSM is still employed at the company and that relationship with the customer is still strong, I think there are certain situations where you want to redirect and point them back to the new contact. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that you're building that. But do you guys encourage each other to still foster that relationship? I feel like you wouldn't want to like say, it's cut off, you can't talk to me anymore, Mr. Customer, right? So there's still some aspect of communication and engagement once you've built that trust, right? Because that's good for the business.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a matter of shifting that balance point of who they're going to for their authority. So, you know, I'm here to help you, but I'm no longer leading your monthly strategy sessions. It's this person. So it's just getting people in the habit of who's owning that relationship. We all maintain the relationship, but it's not jumping in and doing what's natural to us and solving every problem. It's making sure if I was assigned to a customer and now you have them and they come to me with a significant shift in strategy, I need to make sure I don't jump into do mode, and rather I go back to you and say, hey, let's figure out how to attack it. And I don't think it's intuitive to people in customer success to step back before like rolling up your sleeves and saying, I'm digging in. And I think that sometimes makes the transition confusing for customers. So yes, we maintain the relationship. Yes, we jump in. Yes, we help out. But it's redirecting that the person who's ultimately owning the next steps is here, and I'll collaborate with them. But we need to make sure that we keep this person engaged.
Well, it's a natural. I mean, people in customer success, or people who are good at customer success, have high EQ, and it's natural to want to help, right? That just comes naturally to us, right? But yes, you made a good point. You want to maybe you answer a question, but you're redirecting, right? You have to do the same. Yeah, I'm going to help you, but I need to redirect you at the same time to the person who's, you know, who's the point person now, right? So it's not like you say, no, just go talk to somebody else. Like, okay, I want to help you, but let's make sure we're going through the right channel.
Yeah, and making sure that we don't create I don't like mom said, so I'm going to ask dad. Believe it or not, there are customers out there when they get those two sets of relationships that will go to person A and not like what they have and then find their way back to person B. So it's collaboration is the key, especially when you have the situation where you have the two CSMs still in the same arena, still interacting and engaging with a customer.
Yeah, I call that the Emma syndrome. Emma's my 10-year-old daughter. So,
so you're used to it.
So I'm used to that. Yeah, exactly. No, nobody has any questions. So anything else that any of you want to throw out there about transitioning that we haven't talked about, best practices, positive, negative experiences, words of caution, anything at all?
Yeah,
I would just say, like, sorry, Cole, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just going to say, I wanted to just hit on a point that Christy made just a moment ago one more time, because I think it's really important what she said. And that is, you know, when you are making that transition and you've got, you know, a trusted advisor, like we mentioned, and they're losing that trusted advisor, I think it's so important that, you know, the new CSM goes in there kind of guns a-blazing of, hey, I know your success criteria. I know where you're at. I know, you know, and they talk through that. But at the same time, it's so important that they don't think that that's just, you know, step one and okay, I'm good to go. Like, it's so important for them to reassure the customer, but they should be spending equal amount of time immediately building a relationship with the customer, finding out, you know, what you have in common, talking through things, like immediately, if they can, finding pain points and working through that. I think it doesn't make any sense if I go in there and I can tell the customer every single thing about them, but I'm not making, you know, an attempt at building that relationship and becoming their new trusted advisor on the side. And so to Christy's point, I thought she hit a home run with that. And I agree fully with that is yeah, I think a portion of it is going in and letting the customer understand that, hey, we're transitioning your account and the new CSM is fully up to date, but that new CSM has got to go in, and these guys have got to be their baby, their focus right now, where they're immediately getting that relationship. Because if the customer even feels a little bit that they're thrown on the back burner, or the new CSM isn't doing as well as the previous one did, or they just don't understand, that relationship is it's gonna go downhill, and it's gonna go downhill fast. And I've seen from a lot of experience that once a customer starts to feel that way, or they start to lose, you know, that partnership with you, it is really hard to get them back, get them healthy, and get them trusting again. It's almost like they just kind of take a back seat and ride their contract out, and then, you get into the war room with the renewal because we've got a lot of things to fix here.
Yeah. So net, just because I'm up to speed on where you're at and all the information doesn't equate to trusted advisor. I still got to build.
Right.
It's not an excuse. I got to still build that relationship.
Right.
And what I was going to say is I think a word of advice, if for anybody out there who's in the position of doing the account reassignment, understand kind of the emotional feeling that invokes on the person who's having accounts reassigned from them. So as customer success professionals, we pride ourselves in our ability to make relationships. These are like our kids. So although it may make the best sense for your segment, for your staffing, for bandwidth, I know many CSMs who will sacrifice their available bandwidth to hold on to that customer that they've taken from implementation to maturity. So just be mindful of what the CSM who is giving the account away may be going through, especially when it's a situation of like, you've not done anything, like there's no, you are a horrible match for this account. It's just a segment bandwidth. We're giving you, X that's new. Just be conscious of how the giving up person is taking the relationship change.
And if you're good at your job, that's that perspective, taking that outside in thinking, right? It's the same thing. How is this CSM that's losing this customer feeling about the loss?
So Andrew, I just had a thought here, and I'm sorry I'm talking a lot, but let's also look at this from the other side. Sometimes customers aren't healthy. Sometimes customers don't have these beautiful relationships like we've been talking about this entire time. Sometimes a customer might be unhappy, or they've had a CSM that they've despised or something like that. And so I think it's also very imperative for when the new CSM takes it over for them to recognize where this customer is at and really try to find, not just take the old CSM's word for it, and really try to find out where this customer is at. Because if I talk to the old CSM and they're like, this customer never reaches out, they're really hard to work with, they don't like this, they don't like that, maybe that's just because that other CSM maybe threw in 60% with this customer and focused elsewhere. This can be a really good opportunity for the new CSM to come in, start with a clean slate, reach out to this customer, put this customer front and foremost in everything that they're doing, and really build this customer back up, get them excited, get them happy about the product again, instead of just taking someone else's word for it. And now, this new CSM has not only come in and completely changed the relationship with this customer, but they secured a renewal that was most definitely not going to be a renewal had the situation continued with the previous CSM. So I think, when the transition happens, really the CSM, they get the notes, they get things, but they can't just jump in and say, this is what this customer is because the CSM said it. They need to take the data, but then put their own, sentiment into this customer and figure the customer out for themselves.
So that's a great thought. So have any of you ever actually used a transition to repair a customer that was damaged?
Yeah.
I would love to hear that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And Cole, to your point, what we do when we look at transitions, we go in and we do an introduction, a validation, and a discovery is how we look at it. So we have the account transfer, but it's an opportunity for the new CSM to introduce themselves, validate what they've learned, and then dig into discovery. We've had to use situations where we have to make that tough decision and say this fit isn't good and we need to bring somebody else in. Those types of discussions do involve a leadership approach to make sure we understand the expectations and that we're getting the right fit on the team in place. And again, we're managing multiple scenarios. So we're managing bringing a new person in and getting the customer to give us that clean slate, but then also making sure we're not creating animosity within the team. So you still have person A who's employed with your company on the team, wasn't a fit for this account, and you have person B coming in who's now a fit and is talking about how they're nailing it. Like, this is the best engagement ever. and it's a tough internal balancing act as well. But we approach those from going in with, introduction, validation, discovery.
Christy, you were going to say you have used that before, used that tool before as a tool before?
Yes, we have. It's not often, but there sometimes just isn't alignment, right? And you want to create, like, at the end of the day, our goal is to help our customers be successful, right? If this is being a blocker to their success, then we need to change it, right? So we have a very strong policy that there's no ego here in this organization. You are entitled to have your feelings, but you check it at the door. And so not every relationship is going to be a fit. Customers are thrilled with some engagements. They're not as pleased with others. And so for us, it's let's do what's right for the customer. You can't take it personal. Some things won't be a match unless a CSM is completely underperforming, right? And that's a whole nother conversation where they're just not doing their job. You have to just kind of work with them and work through this, right? We have a high level of empathy for our employees and their feelings and that sentiment. We want them to feel good and not feel discouraged about changes that need to happen, but it's not about them. It's about our customers. And so we really try to drive things home through that lens. I will also say, just another thing, the transition doesn't end when that customer is engaging with this new CSM. So just as a point of reference, we also just do check-ins a couple weeks into that transition. And this is from the management team and, depending on the account and the volume of transitions we've had to make. But we do a pulse check, and that is, a manual thing that our leadership team does get involved with. But we check in to see, how has that transition been going? How are you feeling with this new point of contact that you're working with? Are you getting the level of support that you need? Are there any changes you'd like to make? Are there any recommendations you'd like to see? And I think it is important as we foster relationships, not only through those CSMs, but as an organization, to properly support these customers, that we're all invested. And so while I think that there is some need to reserve escalation, as a leader, I care how it's going. And so I will take the time to check in with our customers who have gone through something that can be very disruptive to them. And I don't want to leave that to just the CSM, because in some cases, our customers will feel more comfortable sharing sentiment with somebody else.
Of course. Cool. Great. Cole, Lisa, Christy, thank you so much for participating.
Thank you.
This is a lot of time to take out of your day, so we very much appreciate it. And I think everybody who's going to consume this content is going to appreciate it as well.
Thank you, Andrew.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. I think that's a wrap.